Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we are conducting a complete academic masterclass on a truly foundational pillar of English linguistics. We are looking directly at Tema 41, Pronouns in English, Characteristics, Functions, and Classification, Special Uses. We're going to systematically analyze the mechanics, the classification, and the continuous real-time evolution of English pronouns, making sure you're equipped with all the explicit information, key concepts, and theories from the world's leading linguists.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with a conceptual introduction, dive into the morphosyntactic characteristics, classify their various functions, explore their historical evolution, and finally, translate all of this theory into real-world pedagogical strategies for the Escuela Oficial de Idiomas, or EOI.
All right, let's kick things off with Part 1, an introduction to English pronouns.
So, to really build a solid foundation here, we kind of need to fundamentally rethink what a pronoun actually is. They aren't just lazy, simple substitutes for nouns. They are quite literally the cohesive glue of all English discourse. And this perfectly illustrates the core difference between the two. Nouns operate on an open system, meaning every single year new lexemes like blog or selfie are born and added to the dictionary. Pronouns, however, constitute a closed system. They are a highly restricted, finite set of functional items that have remained remarkably stable since the very dawn of modern English.
And that brings us to something called the replacement function. Now, according to the heavyweight foundational framework laid out by linguists like Quirk and Greenbaum in their comprehensive grammar of the English language, a pronoun doesn't just swap out a single noun. It actually takes over an entire noun phrase or clause. It's a total replacement. So if you say, the tall man left because he was tired, that little word he completely swallows up the tall man. And because of this, pronouns just don't play nice with determiners. Grammatically speaking, you simply cannot say something like the they or a tall they. It just sounds totally wrong, right?
Moving right along to Section 2, morphosyntactic characteristics.
So unlike your run-of-the-mill English nouns that just deal with a common and a genitive case, pronouns are a bit more old school. 6 specific central pronouns actually hang on to this complex, much older 3-case system. We're talking the subjective case, which you use for the subject of a finite verb, the objective case for objects of verbs and prepositions, and the genitive case. And that last one actually splits into attributive determiners like my and predictive nominals like mine.
Now, what is genuinely fascinating about this phenomenon, and linguists call this linguistic vacillation, is the tension it creates in everyday real-world speech. Words like but, except, than, and as create this sort of grammatical tug-of-war. A super strict, prescriptive grammar approach might demand you say, nobody but he came, treating but strictly as a conjunction. Yet, honestly, in modern informal style, nobody but him is way more common. Why? Because speakers are subconsciously processing but as a preposition, which immediately demands that objective case. Crazy, right?
And here's another curveball. Pronoun number isn't just basic math. Plurality actually operates through what we call complex feature bundles. Take the word we, for example. It doesn't mean multiple I's, because obviously there is only one you. It actually signifies I plus one or more other people, which perfectly sets up this brilliant morphosyntactic distinction documented by Biber, Leach, and their colleagues in the Longman grammar, the inclusive versus exclusive we. An inclusive we grabs the person you're actually talking to, so speaker plus addressee. But an exclusive we means the speaker plus some third party, totally deliberately leaving out the person you're chatting with. Just think about the sheer semantic difference between telling your boss, we have a problem, when you mean just you and the team, versus meaning you, the team, and the boss. Huge difference.
Okay, let's shift gears into Section 3, classification and functional analysis.
Now that we've nailed down the mechanics, let's systematically categorize these items. Right at the core, we have central pronouns, personal, possessive, and reflexive. And those reflexive pronouns, the ones ending in self or selves, they are incredibly dynamic. They have a standard non-emphatic use for co-reference, meaning the object and subject are the exact same entity, like he shaved himself. But they also have this really powerful emphatic use where you hit it with heavy stress for dramatic contrast, like the president himself attended. It really packs a punch.
Next up, relative pronouns. These introduce clauses that post-modify nominal heads, and your selection here strictly depends on 2 factors, the antecedent and whether the clause itself is restrictive or non-restrictive. Restrictive clauses give us the absolute essential meaning without commas, while non-restrictive clauses add extra, parenthetical information offset by commas. It's really interesting to notice how a word like that is super versatile for both people and things, but it is strictly locked into restrictive clauses only.
Then we dive into interrogative pronouns. When you're asking questions, picking between which and what isn't just a random coin toss. It actually reveals how the speaker is psychologically framing the options. Which is selective. You are implying a choice from a limited, already known set of options. What, on the other hand, is completely non-selective. It represents this infinite, open-ended universe of possible answers.
And we absolutely have to talk about demonstrative pronouns. This, that, these, those. These are absolute multifunctional powerhouses. They can act anaphorically, referring backward in a text, or cataphorically, pointing forward. They can be dictic, literally pointing to a physical object in the room. But my favorite part is that they actually have an emotive use. In casual speech, if you say something like, "Oh, you know this fellow Johnson," using this actually presupposes a sort of emotional familiarity and shared context with the listener. It's a really subtle trick.
Wrapping up our classification, let's look at indefinite pronouns. This category reveals some incredibly deep semantic nuances. Take the some versus any series. The basic rule is that some is for positive statements and any is for questions or negatives. But, in reality, deep meaning completely overrides that. If you ask someone, "Would you like some wine?" you use some instead of any for a very specific reason. You are expecting, and probably encouraging, a positive answer. You want them to say yes.
Moving right into Section 4, Evolution and Special Uses.
Historically speaking, we can map out a truly remarkable linguistic evolution here. Back in the 19th century, strict formal writing practically outlawed first-person pronouns, favoring the passive voice or that super distant editorial we. Fast forward to the late 20th century, and we see a massive shift toward an inclusive academic we, plus people confidently using I to assert their own agency and clarity. Hit the 2000s, and the digital age changes everything. We're constantly dropping pronouns just for the sake of brevity in texts and emails. And today, we are quite literally watching the linguistic solidification of gender-neutral pronouns happen in real time. Impartially analyzing modern linguistics, this transition toward the singular they is a profound structural shift. Major modern style guides have broadly adopted it to resolve the absolute grammatical inefficiency and clunkiness of writing he or she every single time a subject's gender is unknown or irrelevant. What we're seeing is the language actively, organically streamlining itself for both inclusivity and pure efficiency.
Finally, let's hit Section 5, EOI Pedagogical Implications. So, we have to actually translate all this dense academic linguistic theory into actionable strategies for the ESL classroom. For EOI teachers, rote memorization of isolated lists, totally obsolete. We have to champion contextualized learning. Instruction needs a smart sequence. Hit those high-frequency personal pronouns first, before throwing learners into the deep end with complex relative and reflexive structures. Most importantly, teachers absolutely must apply contrastive analysis. You have to actively guide your learners through hurdles that are entirely unique to English, like the fact that modern English U completely lacks a TV distinction. There is literally no grammatical difference between a formal and informal U, and let me tell you, that specific fact often totally terrifies native Spanish speakers.
As we wrap up our masterclass today, I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. English pronouns are a completely sophisticated paradox. Think about it. They are a closed, highly restricted grammatical category rooted in ancient 3-case systems, yet they are fluid enough to adopt brand new gender-neutral conventions in real time. So the question is, how will you bring both the strict rigidity and the beautiful fluidity of this linguistic system to life for your own students? Something to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep exploring the mechanics of language, and I will see you in the next one.